You're listening to Barely Legal in Web3. I'm your host, Jamelia Greer. This podcast is an unapologetic look at what's happening in tech from a lawyer's perspective. In addition to Tech Talk, each Monday I'll be sharing insights from my journey from lawyer in small town Connecticut to an entrepreneur in Dubai. Sound like fun? Go ahead and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Now let's get into it. So today I am speaking with Alice Chen, who is lawyer turned entrepreneur. She is co-founder and General Counsel at InvestaX and IX Swap. Alice, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be speaking to another lawyer entrepreneur. And I'm sure we'll have a fantastic conversation.
You know, I was looking over your background and your story, and there were so many similarities that I also have been very excited about this conversation to really dig in and to learn more about your journey. So let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, sure.
So
where should I start?
Yeah, where should you start? Take us back to, so you were born in Shanghai, correct?
I was actually born during the one-child policy. So that will kind of give you an indication of my age. In China, there was that one-child policy, and effectively and my parents had always wanted to seek for a better life for us, as most immigrants do, and went to the U.S. when I was, I would say about 6 years old, left me and my sister to be looked after by my grandparents, and they went off to the U.S. not knowing when we would see them again. Back then, it was very difficult to leave China. It was before they opened up, and they were invited scholars to the University of Wisconsin. 3 years go by before we would actually see them again. And we all moved to America. At that point, I'm probably 9. So the first place was Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. I'd never seen snow before in my life. And it was a great upbringing. I just have such fond memories of my time in Madison. And as you know, if you're from the US, it's a big college town, a lot of, college life, big football team. It's a Big Ten. Actually, we were great at pretty much every sport: basketball, hockey, football. So I have such fond memories of my life there. But as a child, I also moved around a lot. And I think it kind of gives you a look into how I ended up in Asia. That adventurous side of me was kind of instilled in me through my parents. They moved around a lot. So from Madison, Wisconsin, we actually spent some time in Vancouver, British Columbia, and then went back to Madison because we loved it so much. And then when I started college, my parents moved to the US. They're professors. And so my dad and my mom's both started working for USC. I graduated college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And then, of course, I followed my parents to LA, and I did my undergrad at USC Law School. And I do remember going to law school and thinking, wow, what a great path, to become a lawyer. I was very idealistic and to represent people who are in need. So my first internship freshman year my first year of law school was at the public defender's office. And I worked with a lot of juvenile kids who were in trouble. And I really felt a sense of satisfaction. But what really turned me off from that whole process was the technicalities of how you work within the court system to either get people on or off the hook, right? And I just was quite frustrated with that whole process. Somehow, I just gravitated towards contract law because I am not very quick on my feet, but I think I am very precise and methodical. And so contract law was something that I gravitated towards, and it's what I do now. And a lot of course, in a startup, there's obviously daily contract work. But for our company, because we are a licensed tokenization platform in multiple jurisdictions, there's a lot of regulatory and licensing work. So I've been doing a lot of that as well as securities work. So that's kind of a whole wrap up of how I ended up here.
That's such an amazing journey. And, these moves, I mean, for me, being a mom and also moving my kids around a bit, it sounds like they were so formative in your upbringing, and also the fact that your parents were both professors. What kind of impact do you think that had on you in terms of your ideas about education and the importance of education?
I actually did a 10-minute TED-like talk at the Singapore FinTech Festival. It's called the Founders Peak. I went on stage, the inaugural Founders Peak stage, and talked about my experience there and how I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur. I was not groomed to be, nor did I come from an environment where that word or that environment existed in my family, right? They're both professors, very academic, and coming from, communist China at the time, you wanted a stable, well-paying job. So education was hugely important. Get good grades and go to good schools and get stable paying jobs at reputable firms, right? And of course, because they were both doctors, initially I had tried out the pre-med route, but that wasn't for me, and nor was it for my sister. So neither of us became doctors. Like, our law was something that, again, is just a personal gravitation, right? I've always loved debating with people for good or bad. And I felt that there was a lot that you could do. I definitely wanted to be in a profession where I could do good, right? Whether you could be a doctor and help people in that way physically, or help people with their legal matters. And so I took the legal route. But I do remember in law school, one of the professors said, I think you're either born an entrepreneur or you're not. And that just stuck with me for such a long time. I never took that jump into entrepreneurship until much later in life, after I had done 8 years in private practice. And I think, looking at my personality and the tracks that I had chosen to that point of time, I just thought I didn't have it in me to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have entrepreneurs as parents. I didn't grow up in an environment where that was promoted. I don't think my parents even knew what the word entrepreneurship meant. So it was very difficult to take that leap initially. And above all of that, I took this path with my husband, of all people. So we actually worked together. Now, the good thing is he is an entrepreneur, and he's been a serial entrepreneur. So he's the exact opposite of me. So, of course, you can imagine we have a lot of conflict, but then with our backgrounds, we kind of balance each other out and we meet in the middle somewhere usually. But it definitely adds multiple layers of complications. And we have a daughter together as well.
Do you think that what that professor said was true, that you're either born an entrepreneur or you're not?
Absolutely not. I think there are personalities that are better suited for entrepreneurship because you are going to get beaten up repeatedly. And I just remember having a bit of an identity crisis when I left law. So I practice at big firms, Skadden Arps, DLA Piper, Dewey Ballantine, these big name firms. And as soon as I said that to people, they would, or say I went to USC Law School, or, I took I'm barred in California. There's an immediate association of, okay, you probably are, have it together enough where I can trust in what you're doing when you're representing me as a lawyer, right? It gave me immediate credibility. But when I went off and started my own business and a brand that no one's ever heard of, and I didn't have a backing of a firm or any big name, it was an incredible, humbling experience. And I had an identity crisis because I felt like I had to constantly justify my position, what I was doing. And especially when we were starting out here in Singapore, fintech had not even become a thing yet. This was back in 2014. And I remember we didn't even have a fintech association. Now it's grown to 800 strong. I'm involved with the Singapore Fintech Association now, but it was an incredibly difficult time. So coming back to your question, was that professor right? I think no, because I am proof of that. I did not think I had it in me, and I didn't have the training or the environment to instill what it takes. But if you have the personality and also the drive to do what you think will, really change your life, and you have to love what you do. And I can get into a little bit about why I did, or why I think this is an incredible opportunity and why I've stuck through it despite the, multiple ups and downs. But it takes a lot of tenacity, resilience, thick face, and the ability to get back up when you've been pushed down so many times and being told no hundreds, thousands of times. So yeah, it's an humbling experience, but I think we all have it in ourselves to be able to build that.
Yeah. That resonates with me so much in terms of, falling down or being told no and having to get back up. And some days I get out of the bed and I'm like, nah, not today. Like, I think at some point it like hardens you, right? Like some days you just feel like a fighter. Some days you feel like you've been fought, right? And so, you feel on the defensive. But some days I think it kind of pushes you a bit. Now, I don't know, maybe you have that too, but some days you wake up and you're like, you know what? I'm going to kill it. I'm going to kill it today because I've been through this, I've been through that, and today is just not the day to mess with me. Do you ever feel that?
Absolutely. And I think the question I have for you then is, do you enjoy what you do? And if on a daily basis you still enjoy what you do, take away all the, punches that you've taken, but do you genuinely enjoy and believe in what you do? And if that's the case, I think you'll build that resilience. And I think for me personally, little things that add to the affirmation that I do on a daily basis. For example, my team getting super excited about a new deal or a new project, or what we're doing right now often has never been done before, right? So we're creating world first projects, and that's exciting to me and to the people around us. And so that really reinvigorates us and keeps us going on a daily basis. We may have losses, but the daily affirmations really help us keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your question, I mean, I totally love what I do, not simply because of the work, but because I know the flip side of that. So for me at this point, I can never see myself going back into the typical role where there are responsibilities with that are only within that scope. I feel as though I'm a little bit too, I've got too many rough edges to really fit inside of that square peg. And so it's about being able to do things like talk to people like you and listen to your story, and then teach other lawyers about technology, and then also to be able to serve clients as well. And so it's being able to have these diverse projects and things to work on. And that's part of the enjoyment for what I do. And I think there's also a bit of, I worked in a firm as well, and I was going to ask you about your experience. So the point that you can share about working at a firm. And for me, so I worked in a regional firm in New York and Connecticut, and I found the experience to be stifling. Not that the work, your first, second year associate, you've got to put in your dues, right? Okay, you've got to redact the paper, the papers with your black marker, all of the things that you had to do back in the day that maybe technology does now. But back then you had to do it. You had to sit there for hours and you had to do it. I just didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed in-house quite a bit more because it was more integrated with the business. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on your law firm experience.
Honestly, I really enjoyed working with smart people, and I really enjoyed the law firm camaraderie that I did get at the firms. I was very lucky to have had that, particularly at DLA Piper in LA. When I moved to Asia, it was a mixed bag. And I think anyone who's been in Asia would know you are almost a jack of all trades, right? It's a little bit more in the US. I think you are specialized in various practice areas. In Asia, you almost just go where the need is. So I did a range of different projects and jumped around a lot. So I didn't have as much of that closeness as I did in the US. But I would say it was an incredible learning experience. Did I love every day churning the same documents and writing the same provisions on every single contract? No. But it did help me think, issue spot. The critical thinking is something that we can take away from our law firm jobs for a lifetime, right? And that's what's really invaluable. But most lawyers, if you speak with them, are probably unhappy because they're at the behest of their clients and their demands and their timelines. And sometimes they're not real timelines. I know this because I'm sitting on the other end now and I'm saying, we need this, except we actually don't need it until next week. But, I think, what's the difference? And some people do extremely well as partners and lawyers at law firms because there is critical thinking. There's a lot of smart people structuring deals, and that is very exciting for them. I found excitement elsewhere, right? I found excitement in building businesses and doing things I had never done before. At the law firm, you're prized for being an expert in what you've done for many, many years. What we're doing right now is creating something new that no one's ever done before. And I think that's really exciting. So I think there is a little bit of a difference.
Yeah. And I want to talk about InvestaX in 1 second, but I want to talk about just the fact that I think it's really fascinating is that you also were a serial expat in a way before you became an entrepreneur. Do you think that those moves and needing to adapt to new situations and needing to be resilient in the social setting in any way helped you with when you decided, okay, I'm going to make the big leap to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I definitely think so. That helped build the foundations for building the resilience, adaptability in being an entrepreneur. You have to be nimble and be able to, let's say, pivot your business from one to another very quickly, or it's about constantly adjusting and putting out fires, I would say. And yeah, it definitely helped. And it's something that I look forward to for my daughter because she was born in Singapore and we intend for her to do, lots of traveling and maybe work overseas as well. I mean, right now, I'd say we're a global citizen in the sense she's born in Singapore, holds U.S. passport, holds Australian passport, but I'm not sure when asked where's home, where is home? I can't really answer that straight up. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we're all so interconnected and global citizens now that we should have the ability to adapt and adjust quickly. It's one of the things, and probably I pride myself in being able to network and just go into any room and start talking to people. I still remember that first day it must have been fourth grade. We moved from Madison, Wisconsin to Vancouver, British Columbia. And within a month, I switched 3 schools due to relocation reasons. And each time I would just walk up to a cafeteria full of new students and say, hey, I'm new here. Do you mind if I sit down with you during lunch? And that's kind of carried me to my adult life now. And yeah, I hope my daughter will have the ability to do a little bit of that as well, because I think it's very useful in life.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that becomes even more interesting as they get to college age. I have a son he was born in the U.S., but he's half Chinese. And so his passport basically says it's a U.S. passport, and he was born in the U.S., but he has lived outside of the U.S. most of his life. And then I have 2 daughters, all U.S. passports. One was born in Shanghai and one was born in Singapore. So we really are global citizens as well. But I think that also kind of gives them this sense of confidence in when you're in new environments. As you mentioned, you walked up to kids and was like, hey, I'm new here. What's up, right? So like they're starting to learn that more at an early age. It's like, you have to learn how to communicate and to adapt to different cultural or environmental or even corporate settings. Things are different wherever you go, and you just kind of have to learn how to deal with it. It's rough, but I think it's a great life skill to have. So that's awesome. That's amazing that you're doing that. I wanted to talk about InvestaX and, your kind of transition. Okay, so you're working in the firm, decide to start this company, both InvestaX and IX Swap. What was the learning like for you? What did you need to learn to feel comfortable to really get into this new space?
Yeah, so I don't come from a technical background, as you know, and this is quite a technical space. But if we back up to the very beginning, the version 1 of InvestaX was not blockchain based. It was a pure crowdfunding platform for real estate. Because I come from a real estate law background. My husband did real estate development. We kind of married those 2 skill sets together and started this real estate crowdfunding website. Very low tech at the time. It wasn't until 2017 where, and I'll admit, ICOs took off. We started looking more seriously at the underlying technology, which is powered by blockchain and various protocols. Started going around to hundreds of conferences. These are mainly crypto conferences. But what we do as a company, InvestaX, is in the regulated space, we tokenize securities, private market assets, what today we call real world assets. It could be real estate, it could be private credit or financial instruments. Recently, I think what's made the headlines is treasuries, right? Tokenizing treasuries. And that's what really caught the attention of the crypto natives and how the RWA narrative started taking off. So not coming from a technical background was a huge learning curve. I spent all my free time basically reading up blockchain technology, tokenization, the use cases. And at the time, there were definitely fewer use cases than there are today. It was mostly, ICO speculation. I'm just being 100% honest, right? And of course, we dabbled in that as well. And what we saw was the potential of this new way of fundraising and what we call crowdfunding 2.0 globally without financial intermediaries. And that was what was really interesting and attractive to us. So we wanted to be able to integrate that into our then platform. 2019, after all of the, strategy sessions, research, reading up, we decided let's just throw away the old platform that we built and make it a completely blockchain-based tokenization platform. And then we went and got all of the licenses because we are operating in a regulated space. So we got a broker-dealer license, a recognized market operator license, which is the equivalent of an ATS in the US to operate an exchange for securities. But 2019 was still too early. I talk about pivoting. We had to do the pivot before we had product market fit. And that was extremely difficult. We debated this internally for a long time. I, of course, more conservative route because I'm, still from a legal background. I was like, are you sure? Can't we just do both? And my partner, my husband at the time, was like, then you just confuse everyone. Are you tokenization or are you old world, crowdfunding? So we decided to just throw away the old platform and bring in build an entire new platform that is blockchain based. And this is before, as I said, product market fit, before generating revenues, etc. But talking about the little affirmations along the way, when we got admitted into the sandbox in Singapore, which is reserved for innovative projects, right? Things that have never been done before, or projects or processes that have not been done before in a sandbox environment. That was one affirmation. And then getting a MAS grant to tokenize the Singapore Variable Capital Company along with UBS and State Street. That was another affirmation. So along the way, we kept on having these affirmations that said, keep going, you're on the right track. What we had to do, though, was extremely difficult. Clearly, I think sacrificing revenues in order to build a new platform. We couldn't even operate for a long time, and just keeping the budget really, really tight to be able to sustain. And many of the players that started along with us are no longer around because they either overspent or, didn't have enough of a runway. So the fact that we're still here, our name is now recognized as being one of the pioneers in the industry, is again affirmation for us to keep going.
I love how you talk about affirmations, because sometimes when you are starting a new business, you have an idea of where you want to go, but there are like 12 hurdles to get through to get there. And you mentioned the pivot before you had product market fit. So basically this rebuild that you did, and it was still very early. I mean, I think that's just so important to highlight, is that you stuck with it. You said, let's cut back on the budget. We're going to stick around for the long haul. And it's so key, because so many people think that you start a business, you get funding, and then boom, you're off, and and then you're in Forbes, and then no, there a lot of these big. Honestly, I really think that's what some people think, but they don't get to see what happens before you see the headline article, you see the cover article of you. They don't get to see that actually we were hungry. Actually, we had to cut back on things. Actually, we didn't have confidence every night we went to sleep that the next day was going to make payroll, or that we were going to be able to do a lot of the things that we had committed to do. And so I think that's another testimony to that resilience and that perseverance that you learned along the way.
Yeah, I think, media headlines also don't help. I remember Brian Armstrong, who's, a founder of Coinbase, said so many entrepreneurs are, lured by the fact that you see these media headlines of overnight success. There's very little of the overnight successes, right? Most businesses take a lot of building, sweat and tears, a lot of hurdles, and maybe you meet, you meet one out of the 12 hurdles, and the 11, you've got to have the resilience to get back up and continue on. But as you said, that it reminds me of another topic, which is, see, my head's everywhere, but AI, right? AI has become such a huge topic now, but AI has been building and has been around for a long time. I think someone even said the first AI application was built in like 1970s or something. And the actual use case wasn't put into the user's hand until ChatGPT came along. That's where we decided AI is the next biggest thing. It's huge. But they've been building, they've been developing, they've been, working on AI technology since the 1970s. And so same thing in what we do. Oftentimes, as you say, do you get up and you say, oh my gosh, is this, did I make the right decision, etc. And I do question, like, when I had these questions prior to this year, the RWA narrative has really taken off. But prior to this year, I would say, when is that time, right? When are we actually going to see the adoption? Are we just making it all up in our heads? But then, overnight, something can change if you can put that in a user's hands, just like ChatGPT did. And I think we are seeing a lot more of that with BlackRock's announcement doing tokenization with Securitize out of the US, and all of the major banks and financial institutions either building their own tokenization technology stack or partnering with other fintechs like us. So yeah, that can change overnight. But what has led up to it takes a lot of time and effort and sweat and tears. So we should not be blinded by those headline stories.
We certainly should not. And as a lawyer and listening to you talk about all of the regulatory approvals that you went to get. And so in terms of you going to make sure that you have the securities and the broker-dealer license and all of this sounds almost like a dream client to me. Like, wow, they knew, but of course you're a lawyer, so you're on the inside, you're like, no, we need this, right? You knew that had to be there. As you were building that up, I mean, what was it like to have this legal background and then to be building the thing, right? So you're kind of wearing two hats. You are both GC and co-founder. And so you are responsible for making sure that, the legal scope is taken care of, but also building the thing.
Yeah, I mean, just a bit more background about how we started. It was just my husband and myself when we first started, self-funding. And that first year was extremely challenging. 2015 was also when my daughter was born. So we birthed the company and a child almost at the same time. And yes, the legal part we knew was important. Not only because of my legal training and background, but because of the industry that we're operating in. There was no doubt from the beginning that we needed to have a broker-dealer license. But then when we started getting much deeper into the blockchain crypto space, if you will, that is where we had to navigate through a lot of the regulatory uncertainty. There were no regulations when we first started out in crypto. Now, in most developed jurisdictions, I would say there's some form of crypto regulation. Not that we're putting what we do as regulated securities broker-dealers or exchange operators in the same bucket. But when we do touch upon crypto, then that impacts us as well. So in Singapore, obviously, new legislation, and there's been some amendment acts which came out related to the Payment Services Act, which is what governs all the crypto operators. That has gone through, and I think the regulators here are quite clever in that they didn't over-regulate. They wanted to see how the industry will progress before they introduce new amendments. And that's what they have, that's the approach they've taken, which is quite clever. But they did want to make sure that the key protections are in place. And how do you do that? You ensure that you at least do KYC and AML checks, right, on every investor, even if they're just investing into crypto. And then you put more stringent rules around the platform operators in introducing concepts which in traditional finance you're already familiar with, like conflict of interest and segregation of assets and things like that. So slowly, they're bringing it on par with what traditional finance operators are familiar with. I would say it was very clear even to non-lawyers operating in our industry, in the security token industry, real world assets. If you're tokenizing something that is a security, it's a security, and it's not going to change form just because you've tokenized it, So that is something that we've accepted from day one.
As I listen to this different perspective that you've brought into this blockchain space, taking some of the Web 2, as we call it, the Web 2 legal concepts such as conflict of interest, et cetera, there may be lawyers that are listening now and thinking, there's too much for me to learn to move into this space. There's too much to learn. But I think you've just made a great point, is that you are needed. We need people like you that understand how the law works to bring those best practices and those benchmarks into this emerging industry. And it sounds like you've been able to do that through the FinTech Association and also just in building InvestaX and IX Swap in the way that you have. So I kind of wanted to point that out because I think it's super important.
Yeah, I think this is a great point that we should highlight, which is, yes, we have AI, we have newer technology, but I think lawyers are still going to be needed for a while. Lawyers, the critical thinking, the issue spotting, and just strategy sessions. You can't, we're not a big company by any means. We're sitting probably just under 50 people now. For that, we have a team of 5 lawyers. For a small company, that's a high, ratio comparatively speaking. Why is that? Because a lot of what we do is on the more, involved side. You have to strategize. You have to, yes, we may not know the laws in every jurisdiction, but we can find out and we can go and analyze and make a informed decision based on that research and assessment. So, having lawyers on the team has been extremely valuable. But at the same time, as a startup, I think we also are very happy to play multiple roles. So our legal team's involved in product design. We are also overseeing some of the cybersecurity elements because there is a technology risk management guideline that we have to adhere to. We are also involved on sales because a lot of the sales is related to, so how are you compliant? How are you dealing with the regulations in this jurisdiction? And how are you dealing with the offering rules? So we are involved in various aspects of the company. So you're not just wearing purely a legal hat, which is what I think most of the team enjoys doing, that they get to be involved on the business side as well.
Well, this approach to business is certainly a lawyer's dream, I would say, as I listen to you talk. It sounds amazing, not just from the practical standpoint, but from the ethical standpoint and the way that you look at the role of law and ethics and regulations in the business. Alice, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I'm sure that many of our listeners will learn so much from you in terms of your personal journey and then also your resilience and your courage to step out and to build something amazing like this. And one note that I wanted to end on is to ask you if you have one piece of advice for a aspiring lawyer that is listening, that wants to get into this space, what would it be?
I think just go ahead and do it. One of the things I've been reminding myself over the years is not to have any regrets. My husband always says, you seem to want to always live in regret. And so I want to have no regrets. And if this is something you're considering, just go and do it. You'll figure out a way. Every day we are faced with problems and challenges, but we figure out ways to deal with it.
That's amazing. And I'm sure that resonates with so many people. Just go out and do the thing. Live your life with no regrets. Alice Chen, co-founder and General Counsel of InvestaX and IX Swap. Thank you so much for joining us. If people want to find you online, where can they find you?
Well, I am on Twitter and I'm also on LinkedIn. Yeah, very easy. My full name is Shy Alice Chen, and you could probably find me. Type in my name and my company, InvestaX, IX Swap, and I should be reachable in that way.
Wonderful. Certainly a pleasure to speak with you today, and thanks for joining us. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. You know, I appreciate when you guys tune in and the time that you take to listen to the show and support us. And I have one thing that I'd love for you to do that would really help us out, which is rate the show. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you rate it. You can do it on whatever platform you're listening on. That would do wonders for us. And if you really want to be a super fan and really support the show, there's a link below that you can support us and donate a small monthly contribution, which allows us to continue to create great content for you. Thanks so much again. Appreciate you and see you next time.